All right, testing out a new microphone. See if the wind isn't too bad. Lighting seems okay. Where was I? The existential crisis. So the CES letter brought me to the conclusion. I don't know that there's a God, and I don't know that anybody can know for sure. You can say you'd theorize the Big Bang, but okay, are we in a simulation? Who's running the simulation? Could you call such a being God? I don't know. I don't know that we can ever know. Let's set all that aside. What's the most logical conclusion I can make from there? Well, after dying, I simply cease to exist. There's no evidence of spirits or ghosts or any kind of afterlife, let alone any specific one described by any religion. They all have their own opinions. But there's nothing to support any kind of continuation of our consciousness after we die. Now, there's value in spirituality, I think. With what I believe and think and feel now, I think there's some value in religion, beliefs, spirituality, certainly. But at the time, I had no framework outside of Mormonism. So it was really just kind of this free fall. And so with the conclusion that I'm going to cease to exist after I die, that was some true terror. I have never in my life felt greater fear than that. Just the absolute horror of just vanishing. Every part of my physical being, everything I've ever learned, everything I've ever seen, the people I've loved, seeing them through my memory, it's all just going to go away. What a waste. What a cosmic waste it seemed. So it took some time to process all of that. I was probably 2 weeks in the thick of it, maybe more. I'd have to go back. But it was bad. It was, I wouldn't say I was suicidal. That really felt unproductive. Honestly, I felt the opposite of suicidal. If this is it, if this is the only thing I've got, hold on to it. Make the most of it. And I think somewhere in there, or maybe afterwards, I realized, okay, this belief in the afterlife makes it easier to procrastinate. And specifically, it makes it easier to procrastinate the things that I had been learning. How to be a better person, how to have good relationships, how to be a healthy person in relationships. Those are things that you can say, oh, well, I'll learn those in the afterlife. That doesn't really matter. I've got plenty of time. And when you don't, or when you feel you don't, there's a sense of urgency to it all. You don't have all of eternity to learn, grow, and repair relationships that have been damaged. You don't get that chance to apologize after you die. So it really maybe gave me a sense of greater accountability. So that was part of it, and I really don't want to sugarcoat it. To me, transitioning out of faith, losing faith, however you want to frame it, going from that belief of believing in a God to no longer doing so, there is perhaps an inevitable existential crisis waiting for you. And how to deal with that, well, I can't tell you. I don't know what your answer is, if you'll do that, or if you'll continue faithful. But all I can say is this: be very gentle with yourself, be very kind and compassionate. If you are in the process, or if you do in the future, be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. After all, isn't that exactly what Christianity preaches? Kindness, love, empathy, compassion. I think those things should apply to yourself as well. Anyways, I soon got on my hands on a book called Combating Cult Mind Control, the work of Dr. Stephen Hassan. He was originally just some guy that was raised faithful, religious, Jewish, I believe, got indoctrinated into the Moonies cult and was deprogrammed after a serious bus accident or vehicle accident, whatever it was. Forced him to rest and recuperate and talk to his family. After that, he went on to write and research about coercive control, undue influence, and this book that he made outlines the bite model. And the bite model is a framework of understanding how cults operate, how they behave. And it outlines 4 different ways that they control people: behavior, information, thought, and emotion. And I would certainly like to cover that more in depth in a different video. I have lots to say about that. It just benefited my life in so many different ways. But as I read that, I bought another journal just for that book and proceeded to read it. And it was one of those books where you read a couple of sentences, put it down, and reevaluate your whole life. It was intense. It was hard work. There's a line that I think is in that book where it says that you have to go back and pick up each belief individually and examine it and either discard or reintegrate it into your worldview. And that really stuck with me, because as I was going, I was realizing here are all these beliefs that I've had, all these things that I thought I knew to be true, that guided my life, my actions. And suddenly everything was up for grabs, and some of these things were really harmful. And so it was like picking the shrapnel out of my psyche. Maybe that's a bit of an intense metaphor, but I think it's apt. Here's this organization that has told you your reality is one thing, but it's not. Every single aspect of your life was determined by this belief in God and Jesus and Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon. Everything came from that in some way or another. Everything that you wear, the things that you eat, how you spend your time, all of it was determined by this church. I had spent 2 years preaching the message in a foreign language. I wouldn't have done that otherwise, and I don't regret going. But it's the harmful parts that are especially important to pick up and dig out. So that's why I use that analogy. So that was Seattle. I lived there 2018, 2019. So then I had to decide what was next. And that was not a decision that I was going to make quickly. What do I believe now? I don't know. Eventually I settled on, I don't care. I have much more pressing issues. My former inability, my current struggles to form and maintain healthy relationships has nothing to do with the origin of the universe. It doesn't matter if it was God or the Big Bang or whatever. However the universe started, we're here now. Now what? How do I learn to love myself? How do I learn to love people around me? How do I do it in a way that isn't harmful to them or me? I'd never been married. I didn't have kids. And it wasn't from a lack of trying. I wanted to connect. I wanted to marry. I wanted to be with someone in that way. It always had such appeal to me. As someone that had felt so much loneliness in my life. And again, I came across this disparity. Families are the most important thing in all of eternity. Families can be together forever. But how do you make a family? How do you form one? How do you create a family? Well, you have to marry someone, okay. How do you do that? You have to find someone that wants to be with you. You have to find someone to date. How do you do that? You have to learn the social skills around all of that. And every single piece along that way I was missing. I didn't have any of that. I've had to build it for myself over the years. Why wasn't I taught that at church? Why were there no breadcrumbs steering in any kind of direction that would have been helpful? Everything that I've learned about all of that, I've had to figure out on my own. And so suddenly those things about the universe, God, just became totally irrelevant to the landscape of my life. And just like in Phoenix, it wasn't much different. Concluding that I didn't believe in God didn't radically change anything in my life. It didn't radically change me, my personality, or my decisions. I was still the same person. I still had to wake up every day, go to a job, earn money, eat, make friends, spend time with family. I was still the same person with the same struggles. Seattle was a particularly it offered opportunity for me to connect with people. I dated several people while I was there, and all of them were really wonderful people. And for whatever reason, nothing really ever stuck. I didn't date for very long while I was there. One gal. We dated for several years. But nothing that turned into a marriage, a family, what I'd wanted for so long. "2020 rolled around. By that time, I was a year or two into my career as a motorcycle mechanic. I wasn't sure it was exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but it worked for then. February 2020 rolls around. My brother and I and his wife, we all go to the Philippines. We all know what happened early 2020 in Asia. It was quite a nerve-wracking trip. We were some of the last flights out of Manila. When I got back, I was furloughed from work. Spent 10 weeks in my apartment, alone. And eventually they let me go at work. I understood things weren't really getting any better. Didn't seem to be getting any better. And by that time it was obvious that most of my family wanted me back in Portland, where most of us are from. So I moved again to Portland, Oregon, back home, where I'm originally from. It was an interesting move. Got on with another company, another dealership. I was a motorcycle mechanic again for a while. obviously through most of that time there was not a lot of opportunity to date and form relationships. After a while, one of my romances from Seattle got back in touch with me, and we dated for a little bit. And again, it was nice, and also not something I saw as a marriage or a family. And eventually, life pushed me in another direction, rather rudely. And this person that I had been dating for a while, I separated from her. Probably unfairly, but that's another video. And here's where the wind is going to pick up, I'm sure. But just wanted to show this. One of my favorite spots in the whole world. So life pushed me in another direction. I tried to date someone else, and it ended pretty disastrously. Around that time, my mother had informed me of a part of her story that I will not be sharing. She is still alive, and I do not have her consent to share it. But over this last year and a half, it has helped to make sense of my story. And after things ended with the new person, I was forced to move back in with my parents. And my story made so much more sense to me. My life trajectory of suffering so much and never really understanding why. There were bits and pieces that I understood, and things that made sense, things that didn't, things that I figured out after years and years of making a study of it. Making a study of my life, my suffering. And like I'd said, I'd gone through so many phases. Introversion versus extroversion. PTSD, trauma, codependency. They were all lenses that were helpful. But this information that I was told and then later was solidified in my view, every single interaction with every single romantic relationship that I had ever had needed to be recontextualized. And let me tell you this experience that I went through, it wasn't the same as the existential crisis of losing my faith, transitioning away from it. It was more fundamentally challenging to my identity. Religion was the context of my identity. This was the nature of my identity. This one thing finally made everything make sense. And I think some of the things might be outside of the context of the content that I want to create, but it's important to know that even with all the information that can be provided from various different sources, even in Mormonism and outside of it, sometimes there's a part of your story that you may never know that'll explain so much. So to anyone out there that's suffering and they don't know why, keep searching. Even if you never find out why, I hope you find happiness. I hope you figure it out. And each time you learn something new about yourself, be open. Be open to recontextualizing that frame, of understanding that framework within other frameworks, of seeing yourself within lenses that might look different from another perspective. So in the time after transitioning away from religion and belief in God, there was sessions of family therapy that I went to, where the counselor said that it was important to have some form of spirituality in your life to replace religion. And it had never occurred to me that I didn't want to seek anything else out. To me, all religion, and maybe even most philosophies or belief systems, were entirely man-made, and I suppose in some degree that's true. But it doesn't mean they're irrelevant. It doesn't mean they don't have value. But still, none of them appealed to me. So what I decided to do is find my own. Make it if I have to. And so from there, I decided to look back on my life and see what had the most significance, what gave me any kind of benefit in terms of connecting to something larger than myself. Because that's such a common thread in all of religion, in most belief systems. You'll see it in AA, you'll see it in recovery programs, you'll see it everywhere. Something greater than yourself, a higher power. Some people tell you, it's you, it's your subconscious. I think there's something to that. What I landed upon, though, was the sum total of humanity. Think of all the hundreds of thousands of people that have come before us, the billions of lives that have been lived, the wisdom that's been learned, the knowledge that's been passed down, the wisdom that changes hands from father to son, mother to daughter, in ways I don't think we fully understand yet. And so I think my understanding of the world is somewhere between the lens of science and philosophy, of no, not the understanding. My belief about how to live my life is somewhere in between science and philosophy, of just standing in the wonder and the awe of everything we will never know. Standing in awe of everyone that's ever come before you, of all the wisdom that we will never know. There's so many belief systems out there, and I think there's value in some way to most of them. Most of them have been around for quite some time, so I don't think they're useless. Some of them have been transformed, certainly, used for nefarious purposes, wielded as a weapon of control. It's certainly true. But I don't think there's wisdom in discarding everything offhand. I think it's important to honor the questions that religion forgot that it was asking. Where did we come from? What is our purpose here? How can I be a good person? How can I be happy? And I think the answers for those questions are different for everybody. Personally, I don't think there is a externally assigned purpose of life, but that just means that you get to find your own. You get to decide what your purpose is. I think over the course of humanity, that was the fundamental problem that we faced. How do we decide what our purpose is? And I think somewhere along the line, our group consciousness, if you will, if you want to call it that, yearned for some kind of guidance in a similar way as children. Our parents guide us. And so as humanity as a whole, as adults, as communities, as a species, we wanted a similar guidance. And I think that desire was one of the origins of religion. Certainly there's many desires and motives to create a belief system. And it's not like any of them came from nowhere. All we had was what was around us. So long ago, we found meaning in the stars, in the sky, in the moon, in the seasons, because that's what affected us. And we tried to figure out why. The day cycle, the night cycle. It's obvious what happens. It's dark, and it gets light in the morning. It's warm during the day. And then there's the yearly cycle. Crops grow, they die, come again. But what about the stars? What about those twinkling little lights up there? What do those control? That must have been a question we've asked ourselves. And so you see the dawn of Zoroastrianism. I think that's what it is. I'm not quite so well versed, but I'm roughly familiar with it all. And again, it was born from a place of wanting to understand, wanting to have guidance. And those are just some of my ramblings. That's the beginning of my story. I'm sure there's more to come. There's certainly parts I want to expand on and tell over again. And it is ever continuing. So, more to come.